Well, good morning, YouTube. It is Monday, December the 5th, 2016, and the time is 9:15. Well, we had an election in Austria and a referendum in Italy, and I take the opportunity to make an English video. I know that the proportion of English listeners of my channel is not so big, but some constantly ask me, so I decided to make one comment video about the situation in English. So in Austria, the Green left candidate Alexander van der Bellen has won the election of the presidency in Austria. Now, our foreign listeners have to know this. A president in Austria is not the all-powerful figure like the president of America or the United States of America or the president of France. The president of Austria has some power, some influence, but relatively limited. Still, it is not so much the real actual power that the president of Austria has, which is the important part here, but it is, how shall I say it? It would have been the signal. The idea that a majority of people rallies behind a Green Marxist candidate rather than a nationalist, patriotic candidate, as the time would require, would demand, is really bad news overall. How people can be deceived by their own fears. And I think this is what is going on. I've always been under the opinion that most people fear change, even if it has the prospect of change for better, for necessary change. They like the misery. They prefer the misery they know over the change that some things might be turned to good. So they cling to the status quo of how things are for a very long time until the catastrophe is so blatant, so strong, that they absolutely have to revolt against the status quo. I mean, if you look at all the great upheavals and changes in the world, most of them were in violent revolutions and not through democratic elections, not through majority decisions, not through votes or debates or such things. I mean, I know a lot of people are always shocked when I say that this quote of Bismarck said, which I find very true. Chancellor Bismarck said the decisions of our time will not be solved by debates and majority decisions, but through blood and iron. When Bismarck said this in a speech, he said it very casually. He didn't mean to incite people to violence, and he was very surprised that people were utterly shocked about him saying that. And what he meant with this was just a factual observation of the reality of the world. And in that way, I stand behind that quote too, because I've always been very skeptical about this idea that we should put so much trust in debates and votes. There is this quote from one of the X-Men movies, from Magneto, and he says something about his memories about the rise of the Nazi Party, and his quote is, "No one ever talks about the extermination. They just do it, and you go on with your lives ignoring the signs around you. And then one day when the air is still and the night is fallen, they come for you. Only then do you realize, while you are talking about organizing and committees, the extermination has already begun." Now, when I see the fascism of our day is Islamism, I think that much is absolutely crystal clear. And the dangers posed through radical Islam, and in general through Islam itself, because while the moderate Muslim might not secretly desire to kill gays, to imprison women, to kill Jews and whatever, I do not think that the majority of moderate Muslim will actually oppose it when a violent elite of Islamists takes over Islam, which is what I think is happening right now. There is a dangerous radicalization of the entire Islamic world. And this is, I think, the big danger, that that the so-called moderate Muslims will certainly not stand in the way when the radicals take over. Where were I? So, we are in the face of a power rising in Western Europe, namely Islam, or radical Islam, as ever you want to put it, and it poses a real danger. And one thing that really unsettled me was watching the latest video of Sargon of Akkad, whose channel I really can recommend to you if you are not yet watching it. And he was reporting about something here in Germany. As you may or may not know about it, I can tell you in a short time. Last year, I think, there were some young Muslims who had who were wearing orange jackets. I don't know how the English word is for it. So signal jackets, orange signal jackets, and on the backside was written Sharia police. Now, as far as I know, they only made it as a sort of joke. I don't know how real that is, because everything is downplayed these days in the media, so I just don't know. But they were walking around with those shirts saying Sharia police. And the regional court said, okay, this is okay, we don't have to confine them, we don't have to penalize them, and they gave them a free pass. Which is a terrible signal. Alone that someone implies that he is police, then when he is not in any way, would be enough to bring someone into jail. And this with setting a bad precedent when someone is actually allowed to call themselves Sharia police and they are not confined and seen guilty by a court, but getting a free pass under the pretense that, oh, they didn't know better, and they didn't actually harm anyone with this. And Sargon of Akkad was bringing video footage from people in Britain who were acting like a Sharia police, a real Sharia police, and they were marching towards people who in the evening drank a beer and say, this is not conform with the Quran, and you are endangering the safety of this Muslim community by drinking beer. And they were running towards someone who they presumed to be gay and were harassing him and saying, gay people don't have to be here this is an Islamic region. And this was London. This was London in Britain. This is the next phase of escalation that we all are facing. And it is a dangerous, horrifying, unsettling development. And I am both angry and desolate and desperate that actually people in our politics, and still in great numbers in the average people, do not seem to realize the blatant danger that this development poses to all of us, to lose our liberties in the entirety. Now, after the election of Donald Trump to president in the United States, and in an overwhelming number, against my expectation, I admit, I had hoped it would have a positive effect on the Austrian election, as to say, we can dare to elect someone despite the media always playing that person as the devil. That people can awake against mass media manipulation and propaganda. Yeah, you know, here in Europe, some people have this notion that, oh, we Europeans are so intelligent and so mentally refined, whereas the United States is full of stupid plebs. Oh, really? The Americans resisted a mass media propaganda machine and elected someone against what all the media told them and made their own mind. Whereas here our also intellectually refined Europeans here in Austria, they voted a Green Marxist as their president. I don't know what's worse, that he is a lefty or that he is a green. I really don't know what is worse of these two. Because the Green Party is really they are the worst party here ever. They're not only for floodgate open, all migrants here come in. No party in the entire German-speaking places here in Germany itself and in Austria is more in favor of opening all borders and letting in everyone who wants to come. That is what, not even the Social Democrats or the Socialists are that strong for opening all the gates. They have some reservations, but the Greens, they want it all open and everyone in. So they're essentially the destroyers of our countries. I could even have understood if they have voted a Social Democrat for president. As rotten as the social democracy in the German-speaking countries are, but a Green Marxist, this is really unbelievable. And I was so disappointed. Austria has a much greater chance for true freedom of speech because they dare to oppose, they dare to speak up. The patriotic movements have the capability to speak up, and their patriotic movement exists for 20 years or more. So they had a much better chance. I mean, I'm no expert neither in Austrian politics nor in Austrian mentality, so it is a bit strange, but I think most Germans don't know that much about Austria, which is a bit a shame, I admit. And until the recent political shifts in Europe, I admit that I had not looked much at Austria. Now, in the European Union, Austria is honestly not a country with any great importance. I wouldn't go so far as Styx Hexenhammer said on his channel that Austria has remained to be a vassal of Germany. I wouldn't think that Austria is a vassal of anyone, and not even Germany. Americans have this tendency to overplay the power of Angela Merkel and the power of Germany. I don't know why Americans have this idea that Germany is so powerful inside the European Union. As the biggest country and the biggest economy, Germany certainly has some influence. But from our German perspective, so much went against our interest that I find this a weird perspective to think that Austria or any country is a sort of vassal of Germany. Now, the problem here is not so much the significance of Austria in Europe, which is not so big. It would have been the big symbol, a symbolic victory, another, for the patriotic movements in the Western world. And now the cards are up again. And the main problem is that, I have to say this clearly as day, that the time is running out. There is that quote from Saruman in Lord of the Rings when Gandalf confronts Saruman, still thinking he's one of the good guys. And Gandalf wants to counsel with Saruman and want to make plans and want to think what can be done in the face of the danger. And Saruman answers, what time do you think we have? What time do you think we have? What time do you think we have? This is the problem of all this. All the patriotic national movements here in Europe, they have this idea that we have endlessly time for protest marches, for demonstrations, for handing out flyers, for making another action and disrupting another meeting of some Marxist globalists or whatever. Our time is running out. That is, in my very personal opinion, the drama of the situation. We don't have 5 years' time. We don't have 10 years' time. The great decisions are to be made now. If Austria opens the floodgates, and Austria lies on the most important Balkan route, that great route where the majority of migrants flood into Germany and flood into Europe. If Austria reopens the borders, it will be a terrible signal for more migrants to come. And how do you plan to get rid of them? I mean, seriously, how do all those alternative movements from the right actually plan to remove them? And that is what we would have to do. We would have to remove a majority of them, if not all. There is this great buzzword of remigration, which is something I fully support. A majority of people who came from Muslim countries, no matter if last year or 10 years ago or 20 years ago, have to leave Europe again. Everyone who does not integrate fully into the Western culture has to go, no matter how long he's here. That's my view. And how do you plan to do this? With protest marches, with handing out flyers, begging Muslims to leave? How do you actually plan to do this without forcing them? And that is why in my last video in German I said that I do not say this often because I don't like to discourage people. But as a philosopher and a scientist, I'm a historian and social scientist. As a scientist and philosopher, I am obliged to the truth above any partisanship, even to those I'm sympathetic to. And that requires me to say that I think that Western Europe is lost to Islam. That is my firm and fundamental belief. I still fight the fight in a pagan sense because I think if we meet in Valhalla because we fight and fall in the fight, that is the honorable thing to do. And it is not honorable to give up, no matter how bad it is. And no matter if you have a chance or not, you do not give up the fight. So I continue the fight because I believe it is the honorable thing and our duty as spiritual warriors to continue the fight. But intellectually, I believe that Western Europe is lost to Islam. Honestly, at this point, if I had by random chance I came to the red button to nuke all of Western Europe, I would probably press it and think, rather set the entire continent aflame than let Islam have it. That's a cruel thought, I know, not a charming thought. rather to death and Armageddon. I think so much of scenes in Lord of the Rings. That is this scene when King Theoden of Rohan is in his hall and he's dressed by, I think, Gimli, and he's pondering how did it come to this. When the orcs are marching towards the gates of his keep, and he has only a few old people and children for defense, and the orcish hordes are marching towards their keep as what he can only see as last stand before the fall. Now in the movie we know Gandalf the wizard comes to aid, but I'm afraid we have no wizards here. We have no magical ring which we can toss into a volcano and then magically the great conflict is solved. We have to face the orcish hordes directly. And I am not very optimistic at this. I don't say this often because I know I do not want to discourage people or radiate this aura of defeatism. And I know, as I said, as a pagan and a warrior in spirit, I believe that we must fight, no matter how likely it is to win, because that's the demand of honor and duty, that you do not desert your post, no matter what. But I'm also a philosopher and thinker, and I do not see much chance. And the reason for this is one very simple reason. There are no warriors, mentally speaking, and physically speaking, in the Western world left by enough numbers. I mean, let's take one small movement, which I greatly respect, the identitarian movement in Western Europe. I really tremendously respect them. I see them as heroic people who hold the last line. But if I look honestly at these young men, will they have the guts for the brute force to toss out the Muslims? Do they have that? With all the consequences of dragging the families out of their homes, seeing the crying women, seeing the crying children, and still say, sorry, you must go, and force them to go? Despite, can you imagine the scenes that will happen? Seriously. Do any young men in greater numbers in Western Europe have the guts to see that through? And no, I do not believe that we can modernize Islam. I do not believe that anything but tossing the vast number of them out is the solution. I'm sorry. I don't have any particular hatred toward these individuals. They are victim of an ideology. They fall victim to a terrible ideology, the ideology of Islam. But their mere presence here is a danger that will destroy our culture, our identity, and everything Europe stands for. Everything. Not because most of them want a stat, not because most of them have nefarious either plans or are terrorists or some such things. No, but because they live by an ideology, and you can examine every single Islamic country to see where that leads to. Every one of them. Always. Wherever Muslims become the majority, the results are invariably the same. As a gay man, I am mortally afraid of this movement. They toss us from the roofs. That is the reality of Islam for me. I just do not see that our Western men have the stomach to do what must be done. It is the scene in, how was the name of this book? Das Heerlager der Heiligen is the German title. The Camp of Saints would be the translation. I'm not sure if that is also is a Frenchman called, I think, Hollebeck. I'm not sure how French is pronounced. The Camp of Saints would be the translation. I'm not sure how the book was published in English in that. It is a book from the, I think, 1970s, and the setting is that, I don't know, tens of millions of people from, I think in the story they are still from India. But a giant flood of migrants sails towards Europe, and Europe collapses because the only thing they could do to prevent that flood in the novel would be to kill them all, to sink them. They know those, I don't know, 10 millions, 100 millions, a large number of migrants are going into a great fleet and set sails for Europe. And everyone in Europe knows if they arrive here, it will be the destruction of Europe in one swift stroke. Everyone knows that. And they know they have slow, weak ships. And the Western Europe still has a big army and a military. So they could just bomb them and sink the fleet to the bottom of the sea. But they don't. They think, oh, there are poor women, there are poor children. So the humanitarian morality destroys Europe. That is a sad reality. I'm not fond of saying that. I do not enjoy the idea of sinking children, women, poor people, purposefully killing people. I do not enjoy that thought. It saddens me. It revolts me. But the reality is that this is an all or nothing time. If we stick to these humanitarian ideals, it will be our doom. I'm sorry if that shocks you or if that offends you, but it is the truth. It is the reality. If we stick to these humanitarian Christian ideals of helping everyone, of giving up self-preservation, it will be our doom. Nothing will be left of us on our way of life. That is the reality. That is the truth. You may not like the truth, but do not hate me because reality is as it is. This is the true struggle of life. You can't always be nice. If you are always nice, you doom yourself. And if a horde of 100 million people should ever set sail towards Europe, we must hope that we have a military that shoots them. Because if 100 million, let's say Africans, if tomorrow a movement from Sub-Sahara starts to move towards Europe and 100 million or 200 million Africans in one move start to move towards Europe, we either kill them all or we are doomed. That is the reality. And that is the reality that nobody truly will face. Not the Patriots, not the Identitarians, nobody. If you hand them a rifle and say shoot at these children, shoot at these women, because if they come here they will reproduce and they will destroy us, will they shoot? Do you think that? I don't think that. I don't know if I would. Honestly, I'm not saying that. I'm a philosopher. I tell you how things are. Make of it. I'm not saying you should do this. Maybe we should vanish. Maybe it is the natural order of things that the Western culture is degenerated and is replaced by Islam. Maybe that is the natural order of things. I don't know. It might be. Maybe we are that degenerated as Islam claims, and maybe the harsh Islamic culture is the vital one who has the right to win. That may well be. I am long past of thinking within boxes that are pre-made of thinking. I'm a philosopher and my duty is to find the truth. Nothing else. And that is what I try. If you don't like to hear it, I'm sorry, then you should listen to someone else who says more pleasant things. I'm sure you find that easy. It is easy to find YouTube channels or friends or people who will tell you that all is fine and all can be saved and solved with debates and discussions and elections. You will find people who promise that plenty. But I do not promise you and tell you what pleases you to hear. I tell you what I see. I finished the channel now. I've talked enough about this. I'm sorry if I've soured your week. It was not my desire. Have a good week nonetheless. And if we fail here, we in our heroic efforts shall meet again at Valhalla, at the side of our glorious fathers who fought and died, and at whose side we then must not be ashamed to meet.